afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday. We've been back from Dean Smith's press conference this morning, sort of digesting all the lines from a very interesting press conference. Adam Harvey joined by Connor Southwell for this preview show. Obviously, we want your comments, so get them down in the comment section below, and we'll try to get round to those towards the end of the show. But Connor, I think the place to start is the man himself, Dean Smith. A few interesting lines this morning, but I mean, where I want to go with it before we sort of talk maybe match stats is with sort of a Dean Smith topic of conversation very regular in press conferences is the fundamental stat that Norwich have lost their last 3 championship games. They've now lost 5 games already this season, and I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole of Daniel Farke, but ultimately when we boil down the stats, the entirety of 18-19, Norwich only lost 6 games. In 2021, they only lost 7 games in the entirety of the season, so they've lost 5 already this year. So you got to feel that, that sort of, I suppose, frustration in the fan base is centred around that. But there's obviously the caveat that Daniel Farke had the likes of an Emi Buendia or they were behind closed doors. But ultimately, Dean Smith should be getting more out of this squad. I think on paper, this team is more than capable to be challenging at the top of the table. This league, in my eyes, is arguably weaker than those 2 times that they've been in this league previously and sort of ran away with it and won the title. So I suppose with that, Connor, with the magnitude of the next 2 games coming up, 1, how big is it for Norwich City Football Club and their promotion credentials? But 2, for Dean Smith, because, you've only got to take a gauge off social media after the game the other night. There's a lot of fans that feel maybe he's not the man. So it feels like maybe that noise would only grow bigger if they maybe fail to get any points from the next 2.
Yeah, huge games, really big tests, both for kind of different reasons. You've got one team that's maybe a little bit out of form and one team that's in form. Obviously, Norwich City, who themselves are struggling for form, struggling for confidence. And I think what we saw at the press conference today was Dean Smith on the front foot, wasn't it? Trying to kind of hit back. Maybe hit back is a bit strong, but certainly make his case against some of the criticism that has emerged against him and his Norwich City Premiership. It was interesting to listen to. I wouldn't necessarily say I agreed with all of what he said, but to me, it kind of felt like a man who's trying to install a bit of confidence in his playing squad again. And I think maybe that is why there are some comments that maybe some people don't feel match up with reality. But I think, the worst thing now for the players who are obviously on the back of 3 straight defeats is if they had a head coach coming out and absolutely battering them and saying that performances were good enough and that they were doing well enough. And it would send confidence, which I would imagine is already pretty low, through the floor. So what he says publicly and what he says privately is 2 different things. And today it probably felt like we got the public side of it, when I would imagine probably the messaging has been private. But yeah, I mean, certainly a massive week for him as Norwich City head coach, I would say, if not for his future, which, I've always tried to make a point that it's not for me to say who or when or if a Norwich City manager should go. But it certainly for the perception around him and the feeling around him, if Norwich City were to end this week having been beaten at Sheffield United, beaten at Burnley, it would be very difficult, I think, to ignore the criticism that would come from that and the feeling that would come from that as well. So it's a big week for everybody, because also if Norwich City win both games, they can sit top of the Championship, and it actually could be the springboard that goes and propels them. But actually, if we see the same stodgy, disjointed performances, they could end up feasibly being mid-table by the time Stoke come to town. So those are how high the stakes are. And obviously, we've had the accounts this week that show the importance of promotion this year. The stakes couldn't be higher. And if Norwich City fail to perform adequately and get results, it's going to be Dean Smith who remains firmly in the spotlight, I'm afraid.
Yeah, he obviously spoke about the shelf life of managers this morning being quite sort of, small in the sense of Steven Gerrard's just been sacked from his former club, Aston Villa. And, Dean Smith said himself he's been here 11 months now. And I think a lot of fans probably feel that that's maybe enough time to sort of implement a style and a philosophy that arguably we're not seeing on the pitch. And with that, I want to just play a clip, because we know that Dean Smith is a bit of a man for stats. He's got a lot of analysts that do a lot of breaking down stats for him. So I'm just going to play this clip and get your thoughts on it, Connor.
Listen, I can't control the narrative when we lose football games. I've always understood that. I've been in this game long enough to know that. But it's not me being bullish because, I'm just plucking figures out of thin air. We actually are having the second most shots in the league. We are actually causing the opposition problems. We are having more possession than any other, than the teams that we play against. Apart from the first half against Watford, where I thought we was really poor and off our game, we should have beat Luton, we should have beat Preston. And, you look at XG as well, that will tell you exactly the same. So it'd be wrong for me to go in and and batter the lads because they get beat 1-0 against a team that in the first half against us on Tuesday night had 0.03 opportunities at our goal. So, you know, I thought we had more control of the game on Tuesday, and I didn't expect it because I expected, you know, a front foot Luton team who were going to be in our faces. I didn't expect us to have as much comfortable possession and control of the game, but our quality in the final third just let us down on that one.
Yeah, he obviously said this morning sort of had more possession than the opposition. They've got the second highest shot total in the league, XG higher than Luton and Preston. They should have won both those games. But how much can you read into stats, Connor? Because fundamentally, if you're a supporter turning up to Carrow Road, you want to see entertainment, you want to see your team winning, you want to see positive performances, you want maybe a connection with your manager that, you know, kind of grows. And it feels like that fan base isn't getting that at the moment. You know, you only got to go on social media. We've spoken about it. The fans are frustrated. They're not seeing performances. And, you know, Dean Smith made that comment the other night that the performances in the last 3 games haven't been massively different to those where they won, you know, 5 or 6 games on the bounce. But is that kind of, you know, almost shooting himself in the foot because it does feel like the performance level is where a lot of the criticism is being angled?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it is probably the performances, and actually, I think there was a point this season where Norwich City were winning games where the direction of travel were either going to be the performances were going to catch up with the results, or the results were going to catch up with the performances. And what we're seeing now ultimately is the latter of those. And I mean, just to kind of look at one of those stats, because, you know, as I said, what I felt it was a defence of his team and his players to try and get some confidence in them. And actually, I've got the stats in front of me here. So the one that I'll sort of zoom in on in particular is the one he said about shots, second most in the league. That's accurate. They've also had the second most shots on target in the league. But actually, for me, that statistic is slightly skewered in the sense that, well, how do you define a good shot? This is why expected goals has been created ultimately. Which is another stat that I asked him about today and that he uses a lot in his kind of analysis. But I've got it in front of me here. So these are kind of the different zones that Norwich City are having shots in: 6-yard box, 18-yard box, and outside of the box. And it's broken down into percentages. So I'll read them to you now. So in terms of in the 6-yard box, Norwich have had 6% of their shots arrive in that area of the pitch. That's 23rd in the Championship. Middlesbrough at the top, 16-yard area. In terms of in the box, Norwich are actually ranked 13th in there, actually joint 11th if you want to play it like that. But 56% of their shots are coming from inside the area. But again, nowhere near the, sort of challenging the teams that are creating chances that produce shots inside the area. And in terms of outside the area, they sit 9th. 37% of their shots are coming from outside the area, which is nowhere near the likes of Cardiff, who are producing 49% of their efforts. But it's not far off. So you look at those areas, and just to contrast that maybe with the teams that they're playing against, Sheffield United, 10% of their shots are coming from inside the 6-yard box. Burnley having 9% of their shots inside the 6-yard box. And that those figures are both higher than Norwich City's. In Sheffield United's case, also having more shots in the penalty area. Burnley having fewer. So, I mean, you can kind of tweak these statistics to however you want, really. But my point is that what I felt he was trying to do is almost talk a good performance into existence, because, you know, we've seen spells in games. There was a 15-minute spell at Watford. There was a 15-minute spell at Blackpool, maybe the best they've played all season, in my view. But what we're yet to see is a consistency of performance. And this is probably the point that Norwich City fans are making, neither in terms of style nor in terms of quality. And that fundamentally is the issue, because the theory that I have always kind of tried to apply to football is if you can get the performances right and consistent, then in the end you will produce results. I think that's probably the science as I would look at it. And at the moment, their performances aren't anywhere near where they need to be, in my view. And so what he is trying to do to a group that is, you know, struggling with confidence, that is struggling with form, is almost try and reassure them that they're on the right path, that they are going to click, that actually it's just small details rather than big structural issues, where maybe that's not necessarily the case. And like I say, what he says publicly is probably what he says probably different to what he says privately. And there's an element of self-preservation in that as well, because, you know, he spoke about it on the Monday Night Club. As a coach, a head coach, and I think the Championship, he's been at Norwich City for 11 months. it's so ruthless that you almost have to try and buy yourself time and articulate what you're trying to do and prove that you're moving in the right direction. So when you kind of add all of that up, that is where I felt we got to today with Dean Smith in his press conference, almost trying to defend where Norwich City are and where they are going. Even if, as I say, you can delve deeper into certain statistics and create an argument that maybe they're not quite as positive as perhaps he would make them seem to be. So that's kind of my reading of it. But it all harks back to kind of what we said. It's a big week for him, and it's a big week for maybe after turf more. We'll find out what and where it's likely to go, and that's testing.
Yeah, I just want to talk about sort of the team news update from this morning. Sam Byram is one that they're assessing. That's a bit of a concern, but I think probably the most pertinent point to start on it is the red card from the other night, Connor, and just get your take on it. I mean, Norwich is still waiting to find out the decision of their appeal, and Dean Smith was asked about Unulis this morning, whether he's capable of starting, and we've seen it in recent games where they've had to maybe chuck players in where maybe they aren't necessarily ready to start games. We've seen that in the past. So if Kenny McLean's decision isn't overturned, which to me it probably looks unlikely from my personal opinion, do you expect Unulis to start tomorrow at Bramall Lane?
Yeah, I mean, he kind of said that he wasn't ready for a start, but it was needs must, didn't he? And for me, if Kenny McLean isn't available, then it will be needs must, and it will be Dimi Unulis, in my view. I don't really see who else could play there unless they tried something with a three at the back, possibly with, again, this is presuming Sam Byram's out, maybe looking at bringing Jonathan Tompkinson in and playing with wing backs. But that's been something he's been quite reticent to do, I feel, this year, play with wing backs. So, yeah, they'd have to find a solution to it. I'm not quite sure what that is. I could see them doing something quite funky and maybe putting it on El Hernandez there. I think he played there for Birmingham on a few occasions. So that wouldn't necessarily be the most surprising. But I think, you've nailed it there. I think if Kenny McLean's appeal doesn't get overturned, in my view, I've said this numerous times, I'd be really shocked if it does. Then they'll have to go with Dimi Unulis, and it'll just be a case of trying to get him through that game or get him through as much of that game as is humanly possible. Maybe then you could look at Unulis playing X amounts of minutes and Sam Byram playing X amounts of minutes and managing that carefully. Whether Dean Smith will get that luxury, I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, it's a shame for Kenny McLean in a sense, because actually before that red card, I felt he was one of Norwich City's better performers on Tuesday night. And so that's a little bit of a shame. But by the same token, you do feel that there is going to be more balance and probably more attacking thrust with Dimi Unulis in the side, providing they get a fully fit Dimi Unulis and not one who's playing on 70, 80%. So look, it's a risk. It's where Norwich City are at the moment. They're kind of having to find players to fit holes and to find solutions to various fitness issues. And whoever plays in that left back position at the moment seems to be cursed, don't they? But with Sam McCallum and Jakob Sorensen, as he said today, probably unlikely to return before the World Cup break, they're going to have to continue to find solutions. And that also means managing Dimi Unulis really well after what was a fairly long-term injury. So, yeah, sadly, I feel it will be a case of needs must, and it may be a case that Norwich City need Dimi Unulis before Unulis is completely ready to perform at the levels we would expect. So it's going to be a really interesting call. It's going to be a really interesting team selection, as the last 3 or 4 have been. But yeah, I would suspect, unless we get news this afternoon that Norwich City have had that red card overturned, that it will be Dimi Unulis starting at left back tomorrow, unless Sam Byram is fit and available.
Yeah, before we just sort of turn onto the subject of Sheffield United, I just want to talk about Norwich and how they approach tomorrow's game. I mean, we know they've struggled a little bit creativity-wise and struggled to score goals in recent games. So tomorrow going to a Sheffield United side, which, I mean, particularly under Chris Wilder, they were very resolute, but it feels like Heckenbott was maybe trying to implement a similar style. I spoke to a Sheffield United fan yesterday on Terrace Talk, and he kind of said, they've almost tried to sort of, since Jukanovic left, they've gone back to that Chris Wilder style, maybe less of the overlapping fullbacks, but certainly trying to be more defensively strong and maybe win games 1 or 2-0. So what have Norwich got to do tomorrow, creativity-wise, to break down Sheffield United, and maybe which kind of players would we expect to be in those attacking areas tomorrow?
Well, I mean, you take Dean Smith at face value. He didn't feel there was too much wrong with the performance on Tuesday night, so that would lead you to think that he's going to go for the same 11. I felt that they were pretty bad in the final third, to be honest. I didn't feel they were particularly functional, particularly cohesive. They didn't really create a lot. So again, we're going to find out if what Dean Smith is saying publicly is what he thinks privately, because if he now goes and makes 3 changes and almost alters the attacking structure completely, then we know that actually he wasn't too pleased with Tuesday or not as pleased as he's made out. So, yeah, look, I think they need to find ways of hurting teams consistently. They don't do enough for me in possession. They don't do enough to hurt teams in open play. So they need to find a solution to that. They need to get a better supply line to Timu Pukki and Josh Sargent. I'd be very inclined to play Josh Sargent down the middle, to be honest, if he's fit and available, because it's not working on the left. It's proving detrimental to Norwich, I think, and particularly with Yanulis there, I think that probably lends itself to having a bit more of a creative option in there, because you can let him come in field and Yanulis will bomb on and you retain the width. So that's maybe less of an issue than it has been in recent weeks. But yeah, from an attacking perspective, they just need to be more cohesive. They need to have a clearer plan. They need to have better combination play on the edge of the box, and they need to function better in possession and to create those opportunities. So, I'm sure it will have been a real key topic on the training pitches of Colney this week to try and work out exactly how they resolve that. But for me, it comes with speed of possession and how quick they are in transition, because if Sheffield United, as we expect them to be, resolute, dogged, I think the fact they're away from home might actually suit Norwich. I think they'll probably get more space than they would do at Carrow Road, because I think there's probably more pressure on a team not to just deploy a low block and look to hit them on the counter. So I think it actually might be a game that suits Norwich City a bit more than, say, Tuesday night did. But equally, they're going to have to fashion more opportunities and more big opportunities than they're doing at the moment to work, as I've read with those statistics earlier, shooting opportunities in better areas. And if they can do that, then I think because of the injury crisis that Sheffield United have, because of the lack of form, it does feel like whoever gets the first goal may well go on to win this football match. And if Norwich can do that by hook or by crook, then I think anything. But yeah, they just need to improve their efforts in that final third, I think.
Yeah, Sheffield United on a very similar run to Norwich in terms of form, really, really struggling. But a lot of it's been centred around injuries. The likes of Sander Berger, John Fleck, or key players in that Sheffield United midfield have been injured for quite a number of weeks. But I think they're slowly starting to get a few of them back. But I'm just looking at sort of their form in recent games. A 1-1 draw at home to Birmingham, a 1-0 defeat to QPR at Bramall Lane. They then lost 3-1 to Alex Neil's Stoke. There was that 3-3 crazy game against Blackpool where they got 4 red cards in that game. And then on Tuesday, I think it was Wednesday even actually, they lost 1-0 to Coventry. So really, really struggling there, Connor. But, we know Bramall Lane's a notoriously very difficult place to go. The fans get on top of you. It's quite noisy there, and Norwich tend to struggle there, and they've had a few wins down the past. There was that season in 2017 where they struck quite early with Yannick Wiltshire, and then Chris Wilder wasn't very pleased that the bus turned up late, and there was all that palaver after that. But just how difficult will tomorrow be? Is Sheffield United's lack of form maybe a positive for Norwich, or is that going to make it more difficult in the fact that they need to turn their form around as well?
I think you could argue for both cases, to be honest. I think you could say it makes life more difficult, and you could say that it's probably a good time to play them. It's tough because they're not bouncing into this game as a form team either, which is why I think the early stages of the game and trying to get a foothold in the game will be so important, because if they can do that, then I think the other team may well go in its shell. And like you say, I think what you get at Bramall Lane is a very fierce atmosphere. What they need to do is probably ride out an early storm and then try and get a foothold in the game and assert some of that control that Dean Smith has wanted to see. Because I think actually, if you can frustrate that crowd and if you can get them to turn, that probably works in your favour. And it is a very hostile place, and it is a place that's difficult to kind of navigate, I suppose, and get a result from. But actually, that's what Norwich City have been quite good at doing on the road. They've gone to some tough places and have been able to grind out results. So for as much emphasis that we've put on performances, actually tomorrow may not necessarily be about the performance. It may be about how well they can manage adversity and how well they can put out fires and how well they can hit teams in transition. So it may be a completely different type of game. But by the same token, when they are in possession, they have to have more quality and more creativity than they have had. I can really see a game that's quite open. I can see a game that's quite cagey. I can kind of see every type of game, if you put them all in on the table in front of me, because I think you've got two teams that are probably underperforming at this moment in time. And at some point that will even out, I think. So I think that probably leans me towards quite a cagey affair. I don't know about you, but I can kind of see two teams going at it. But I can see two teams that are quite nervy as well.
Yeah, I can see something
Sorry, I
similar.
think you might have lost me there.
Oh yeah, you've been breaking up a little bit, but I can hear you now. Yeah, I think I'm with you. I can see a really cagey game of football and two teams that are pretty desperate for points to turn around their form. And it feels like if Norwich could go and grind out a win there tomorrow, it gives them a little bit of momentum and going into that really, really difficult game at Burnley on Tuesday evening as well. So it does feel like a big point in Norwich City's season, and one especially for their sort of promotion credentials, as well as Dean Smith's, sort of, I suppose, connection with the fans, because that's lack of connection. Maybe if it is a defeat tomorrow, then I only feel that's gonna get worse, and the Smith out camp is probably gonna grow bigger. We'll be live for about another 10 minutes or so. So if you've got any last comments, then get them down into the comment section below. We'll come around to those in just a moment. But before we do that, Connor, obviously the club dropped the accounts this week, and we've not had a chance to really speak about that on any live platform, audio visually wise. So you've done a really great analysis piece talking about sort of what impact this is going to have. And we asked Dean Smith the question this morning, is sort of the concern of the accounts make it imperative that Norwich get promoted within sort of the next season or two. So I just want to get your take on it and maybe just break down some of the figures for people that haven't had a chance to read your piece.
Yeah, it made really interesting reading. I think there's some numbers in there that should concern people, in my view. There's some numbers in there that maybe present positives. I guess the headline figure is the 23 million pound loss that Norwich City made overall over the last financial year. What's perhaps more interesting, digging deeper into that, is the fact they've taken 66 million pounds out in loans. You have to kind of trade that against cash in hand at the end of yearly earnings. So it makes it around a 46 million pound hole off the top of my head. I need to go and double check that, but that's about right. But 44 of that essentially is against future broadcast rights. So that is essentially Premier League broadcast money, so to speak. And they have parachute payments that insulate them slightly. But what that means in kind of layman's terms is this season, they are going to have to cut the playing squad. They're going to have to cut wages. They're going to have to cut budgets, and they're going to have to cut what they're trying to do with the squad. So it makes the stakes higher and makes the emphasis on promotion greater this time around because of the numbers within those accounts. The accounts also showed that they paid more in wages than Leeds and Brighton. I think there's a fair few other Premier League teams in that as well. £15 million on loan fees last year, but that incorporated both loan fees and wages for the years, as I understand it. There are numerous others. I've written a piece about it over on the Pink and Plus app. I'd urge people to read that and for maybe some more analysis on it. We will obviously have plenty of questions that we would like to put to the club about certain aspects of it. Made a request that was declined, sadly, so we're not going to have an opportunity to do that, which is a shame, because it would be nice to provide, to be able to scrutinise some of those numbers and scrutinise some of the decision making behind those numbers, but that's not going to be the case. So yeah, all of it paints a picture of, well, it's quite an intriguing picture. It's quite a bleak picture, to be honest, and it's why the emphasis around promotion, and ultimately that comes back to Dean Smith, doesn't it? So yeah, it's not promotional bust. I wouldn't put it in that category, but it's certainly promotional cut. And if Norwich City don't get promoted this year, we're going to be back perhaps where we were towards the start of Stuart Webber's tenure and Daniel Farke's tenure, when it was about recruiting players essentially on free transfers and lower wages. And that is where Norwich City are going to be again. They're going to be in need of some kind of rebuild of some form, certainly of the squad. So, they've got, I think, 9 players off the top of my head out of contract at the end of the summer. That would be an easy way to cut money, for example. And yes, they are insulated to an extent by parachute payments, but not by enough that it would prevent cuts. So that shows, for me, the importance of Norwich City getting out of this division this season, because if they don't, the finances will catch up with them slightly. But that's the key figure for me. What that in the short and the long term.
Yeah, let's delve into the comments. Will on YouTube saying Smith is coming across as pretty desperate already, a man under pressure. The red card appeal was a bizarre choice. Joseph disagrees with him, says, I honestly think that it was not a red card for Kenny. He's being dragged back by the Luton player. It's an accident and we have to win games, which Will responds, CFL's decision, and the ref tends to, be the one that they tend to back, which is very much the case. Michael on YouTube as well saying, so annoying how we can have so much possession of the ball and do nothing with it and lose it. And David on Facebook saying, if Norwich lose the next 2 games, do you think Smith's job is in jeopardy? We kind of spoke a little bit about that to start the show. So if you just rewind after this, then you can go and get our thoughts on that one. And I think that lends itself, Connor, to the question of the show that we all love. How do you see this one going and score prediction? It feels like quite a big game for Norwich City.
Yeah, I mean, nice. I think it'll be a tight game. I don't know. It's tough, isn't it? I think it's really tough in the current climate to predict what we're going to see or how a game's going to unfold, because I'm not entirely sure what Norwich City we're going to get. Two teams out of form, two teams that need a win. The natural conclusion for me is to reach a draw. So I'll go for a 2-2, but even a little bit of me feels like that might be a bit high scoring. So I'll go over to you, because you're like Norwich City, you're a little bit out of form with predictions, but I'm expecting you to get a good one before you obviously leave us for a little bit of a break.
Yeah, I've had a few shockers recently. I think with Luton, I went 2-0 the other night, which was very far off. But yeah, I'm with you. I can see a draw, but I think 1-1 in this one. I think Norwich will maybe strike early and have something to cling on to, but I think that home crowd and Sheffield United sort of being at Bramall Lane might be a little bit too much for Norwich to withhold, and they'll concede and it'll be a draw, which I think both teams, it's not necessarily the result that either team would want. Both would want to, get a win and sort of maintain themselves in that sort of top 6 mix, because it's so tight in the Championship this season. I think I saw look down at the table and it's down to about 13th. It's only separated by like 7 points, which is absolutely crazy. But it feels like if Norwich can get a win tomorrow, then that might be enough to push them back into sort of the top 2. So going into that Burnley game, that would be huge in terms of confidence. So really looking forward to it. As you just said, I'm off this week, but I am at Bramall Lane tomorrow. Got a first time in the away end for sort of over a year. So looking forward to it in that element. But yeah, not overly hopeful that Norwich will come away with 3 points. But with that, we'll round off the show. Thanks for joining us this Friday afternoon. We've got all the sort of usual content across our channels at the moment. If you're a Pink and Plus subscriber, then why aren't you if you're not? So $1.99 a month. Well worth a free trial as well, so you can go and check that out. We've got Terrace Talk on there at the moment, which is with a Sheffield United fan, giving that sort of all the Blades insight. We've also got Dean Smith's press conference up from this morning, so you can go and listen to all the key lines and make your own judgments on that. That's why football's objective. You can make your own opinions. And yeah, all the usual match build up tomorrow. Team news lives, obviously. Join Connor and Paddy from Bramall Lane for all the team news. We'll be interested to see if likes of you Nulis and Kenny McLean will be in that team. And with that, yeah, we'll see all the usual reaction and post-match analysis as well. So yeah, should be a tasty one. Always a tasty one between Norwich and Sheffield United. I don't know if the rivalry sort of between the fans is still there. I'm a little bit out of the loop with that one, but certainly been some tasty games down the years. So with that, thanks for joining us again, and enjoy the rest of your Friday. And if you're traveling up to Bramall Lane, safe travels, and fingers crossed Norwich City can reward you with a win.